All right, so nice to meet you all. I think it's the first time I come here to your beautiful center. And so I've been asked to speak a little bit about Lamrim realization. So my idea is to speak for about an hour on that topic tonight, and then we have question and answer. And then tomorrow and after tomorrow, we're actually going to get the realization we talk about tonight, right? There's no time to waste, right? So tomorrow and after tomorrow, we put into practice. Okay, we're going to meditate on it. So Lamrim means, Lam means path and Rim means graduate. So this tradition, we say that the Buddha gave 84,000 teaching. The Buddha taught for almost 40 years. When he reached enlightenment in his 30s, and then till his 80s, he was traveling to North India and teaching. And so he taught from children to mothers to scholars to yogis. So depending to whom he taught, he gave very different instruction, right? So, and in those days, nothing was written down, right? So it seems that at that time, people had much better memory than we have nowadays. They say people had unfiable memory. So some people would memorize all what the Buddha actually taught, right? And they passed it on for about 500 years, nothing was written down, right? So from teacher to student like that, it went on. And then about at the turn of the century, things were start being written down, and they were recorded in two languages. One was in Pali, and the other one was in Sanskrit. So that's how you ended up with two stream of Buddhists, right? Depending on where the things were written down, right? So the Buddha might have. We don't know exactly which language he actually talked in. Many people think it was in Magadhi, the local language of where he actually lived. And then the Buddha's teachings were there were kind of two lineages. So one was about the profound view about reality, so that was the wisdom side, and then the other side was the method side. So the teachings on the gradual path to enlightenment and how to generate love, compassion, how to behave ethically. So all the how you live a spiritual life, right? So these two traditions, went on. One was so the wisdom side was carried on by Manjushri, and his teachings then were passed on to Nagarjuna, Asanga, and so forth. And then the method side came from Maitreya, and then his students passed it on, right? And when they came to Tibet, so I think they were students always wanted to practice. How do you put these teachings into practice? How do you get the experience? So what is interesting is that this path is 2,500 years old. Still nowadays, that tradition produces highly realized beings, high yogis and yoginis, really beings which are otherworldly from our perspective. And so if you meet people like His Holiness Dalai Lama or like Lama Yeshe, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, or all these great saints, when you're in their presence, you see, oh, that's something, there's something uncommon when you're with them. So still on this planet now, there are beings like that we have the opportunity to meet. So when the Buddhism came into Tibet around 7th century, right? So a king invited great yogis from India, like Padmasambhava, Vimala Mitra, and so forth. So they came to Tibet around the 7th century. And then the next king wasn't interested in Buddhism, so it decayed again. So then a few hundred years later, a sympathetic king invited again a great master from India that came to Tibet, right? So that was called the second time when Buddhists came to Tibet, or the second turning of the wheel. And during that tradition, so many different lineage. So Tibet is a big country, so some yogis were invited in this part of Tibet and some were in that part of Tibet. So they were actually completely independent from each other, right? You know, so there was no internet that time, there was no telephone, you know, so they wouldn't communicate like that. So uh, Tibetan Buddhism was established in different regions independently from each other. Right? So that's how you end up the Nyingma tradition, the Kagyu, the Sakya Gelu, is mostly these yogis from India were invited to Tibet and then they establish their tradition in different parts, right? So one of them was Atisha. So he came from the great monastery of Nalanda in northern India and he was invited to Tibet. And then when he was there, he thought, oh, and he speak with the scholar and the yogis of his time. I said, maybe there was no reason for me to come here. You know, you quite know a lot. And then, but then when he asked little questions here and there, oh, he found that they didn't know how to fit it all together. You know, how do you practice sutra and tantra together? You know, how do you be a monastic or a lay person? You know, how do you make it work for an individual on his spiritual path? So people didn't really know how to put it together. So he composed a text called The Lamp on the Path, right? And there he put all these teachings together for an individual, how to grow from stage one, gradually, you know, how to evolve, right? So that Lamp on the Path was the first Lamrim text, the first graduate text, you know, put together in that sense. And then, because it was so popular, it was drafted up on all the other traditions. So all other traditions started also making their own Lamrim, you know, their own graduated path, right? Because it was very much needed, right? And then, so that brings us to the 14th century where Lama Tsongkhapa came. So Lama Tsongkhapa was kind of a special individual in a sense that as a child, he was very precocious. You know, he was very bright, very intelligent, and his parents were spiritual practitioner, and his uncle took care of him. And so he practiced from the age of 5, 6. He already, you know, and was very bright. He studied intensively. And so he became one of the great scholars of Tibet. And not only was he a great scholar, he was a great yogi, a great meditator with a high attainment. And he had direct vision of Manjushri himself. So whenever he had question, he could ask Manjushri directly, you know, to clarify obscure points and things like that. And he was a great writer, so he wrote many commentary, many texts. So he clarified many obscure points that existed at his time. And he created great festival in Tibet, great gathering, you know, where people, you know, like Christmas, maybe it's the Tibetan Christmas. You know. So event like that, you know, where people would come together and do some spiritual practice together. So, yeah. So in our tradition, the Lamrim that we follow is the one composed by Lama Tsongkhapa, right? So Lama Tsongkhapa wrote the great commentary, the great Lamrim. So it's called the Lamrim Chemo. So the great graduate path to enlightenment. And then So that was with all the, it contains not only the Gradual Path, but with the scriptural authority, where it came from, where the Buddha said that, who clarified that. So you have all these quotes in that text to, to prove his point, right? So then he composed a smaller text, which calls the medium Lamrim, which is more for yogis, that you would take, it wasn't, you already convinced. You don't need to be convinced. You just know what you know to practice. So the yogis or the aspiring yogis, that's what they would take in their bag and go up into the mountain, right? And then he composed a short text, the hymns of experience. So that's it has just a few pages where he just puts out the main point, the pit instruction on each point. So it's a beautiful text. It's actually like a small Tibetan poem. So it's a beautiful poetry. It's beautifully written, and it has really the key point of the path to enlightenment. So, I mean, one starts the path as an ordinary being, right? Just being concerned about this life, where I get my food, how do I make a living? Do I get married or not? Do I have kids or not? Where I'm going to live, what I'm going to do, and things like how can I be happy in this life, right? So that's the ordinary perspective. So the first stage on the path is to realize, well, this situation is not going to last forever. I'm going to die, and what's happening after? Right? So that's the first question mark on the spiritual path. Hey, I'm mortal, and what's happening after? And am I going somewhere? Is there an afterlife? And what's going to happen in the afterlife? So that's the first spiritual question that one has. So before that, you have to try to understand or get an experience. Does something go on after life or not? Or is the mind just a product of the body? And when the body dies, the mind disappears? Or is there something else? Is the mind or consciousness or awareness something independent from the body? Right? So there you can follow a stream of reasoning to prove that there's a consciousness separate from the body, but you can also approach it experientially. You see, you can actually in meditation separate your consciousness from the body and realize that you are that consciousness that now temporarily body, right? And then that consciousness, when you die, leaves the body. Right? Like it does, when one dreams, right? So a dream, if you try to, for those which do lucid dreaming or have strong dream experience, what is that dream experience? Is it inside the body? Is it outside the body? What's going on there, right? So yogis, they investigate that too, right? So there's a yoga called lucid dreaming, the dream yoga, where you try to be conscious in your dream, and then with the dream body, you go wherever you want, So, and then there's also the meditation of regression, where you go back to the time of birth and then to the time of conception. And then where does the consciousness from the time of conception come from before? So some people can get back that, they can follow the thread back to his previous lives, to what happened before. So from Buddhist point of view, that consciousness, mind of awareness, what it is exactly, So to experience what is that thing that is immaterial, that is formless, has no color, no shape, and in which thought and emotion arise, insight come, and what's that thing, which doesn't obstruct any thought, any emotion, any mental image that comes. It's almost like a crystal ball in which you can look and all these manifestations of the mind arise, right? But if you want to see, but what it is, what is this mind? So you stare, you look, and all you can say, it's formless, no color, it doesn't abide anywhere. So you try to become that and see the life from that perspective of being in consciousness that has no beginning and no end. Basically, we are all eternal. We have always existed and we will always exist. It's just a form that changes, right? So then how does that process works? So that's what one investigates at the beginning of the path, right? So at the beginning, how to say? Yes. So at the beginning, each point of the graduate path to enlightenment, you have 3 levels. You have that point from the point of view of hearing the teaching or reading about it. So it's a new information. Oh, yes. Oh, there's a consciousness as a beginner. Oh, yes. Maybe, maybe not. Right? It's a new information. What I'm going to do with it. Right? So then the next stage is inquiring. Right? So it's the wisdom that comes from contemplation. So basically, you read about it, you study about it, and then you try to see, you play the devil's advocate. What's the benefit of looking from that perspective? What's the drawback of doing that? Is it better to go along with that, or is it better not? So you deal with each topic on the path to enlightenment. You try to analyze and see whether it makes sense. Right? So you don't accept it because the Buddha said so, right? So you have really to work with the material, okay? So that then you come to the insight that comes from contemplation, right? From reasoning, from thinking about it, right? And then comes the wisdom that comes from meditation. So then you try to internalize, you try to experience that, right? So to meditation, so there you alternate calm meditation where you sternly still your mind, you bring it to a quiet state of awareness, of clarity. And then within that space, you use subtle lines of reasoning to bring you to a certain experience. Right? So it's a much more profound way of experiencing things. You see, it's almost like what we would call in the West intuition, but deeper than intuition. It's much more stable. You see, because the mind is very calm and you go into that clear inner space, and then you have this thought that arises, and then the intuition and brings about that experience. Basically you stare into that experience in the clear spaciousness of your own mind. So within there, all the questions have answer. So enlightenment, Buddhahood is not found somewhere outside. It's something that's found within each one of us, right? So it's a path where you go inside and things reveal itself to you, right? So yeah, so you have the intellectual information, and these things, they are information that lead you to that inner journey, to that inner experience, right? And that's for each point of the path to enlightenment. First, you try to understand it intellectually, then you work with that material, pro, con, why should I believe it, why not? What is it better to follow along? Is it better not to? So you debate with this material. And then that leads you to a deeper understanding. And then from there, with meditation, you can then experience things. So the first stage of the Vipassana is to see, there's this continuity of consciousness, right? I'm eternal. I have always existed. I will always exist, right? So death is just leaving this gross body, going to a more subtle form, and then leaving this body with this dreamlike body. And this dreamlike body, it's not naked like a rosy little baby, how you say a rosy little baby that nakedly come for life for the first time, which is completely pure from the beginning. Our consciousness, when we leave the body, we leave with all our habit, with all our memory, with all our predisposition. You see, all that comes along with our mind. So we're not a fresh, rosy baby, discovering the intermediate state the next time. No, we live this life with some luggage, with some baggage, right? And depending on the baggage we carry, we end up in this and that place, right? So there comes the teaching on karma, on cause and effect. What imprints are left in our mind when we leave, how can we control where we end up after, right? So there comes this teaching on cause and effect and virtue, non-virtue, what's positive, what's negative, and then how do you manipulate that? You see, for example, it says, a stupid person which doesn't know much, he doesn't do much negative action in his life, but because he doesn't know how it works, with time it accumulates into a big load, But another person which is quite smart, he knows how it works. So even though he does some kind of negative action from time to time, but he knows how to clean it. He can clean his mind again and again. So even though he's quite a bad person, but because he knows how to deal with it, actually there's not much negativity accumulated, because he's smart, he knows how it works. So he can, even though he creates negative action, he can also purify it. Whether the other ones doesn't create much negative action, but he doesn't know how to purify, he doesn't know how to clean his mind. So with time, it accumulates, right? So to understand how karma works is important, because then you're in charge, you're in charge of your mind and your destiny. So basically, the first level of spiritual realization is to take care of one's action. When we mean action, is that what we do with our body, what we do with our speech, and what we do with our thoughts. Is to become aware whether I take care of my body, speech, mind, whether I'm in charge, whether I know how to live a wholesome life, and when I'm getting off the track, how I'm able to know how to clean it and go back on track to have this wholesome life, right? So for a person who lives like that, he's quite happy, how to say, living a wholesome life is not because God said so or because some outer beings tells you that this is bad or this is good. It's not like that. It's something from inside. You see, if you live a wholesome life, you have inner peace, you have inner joy. When your mind is clean, you have this inner joy, satisfaction, you're happy, and that happiness or that contentment doesn't come because you're with this and that person or do this and that or have this and that thing. No, it's just a natural peace, contentment. You're just happy to be. It doesn't need any reason, and that comes from taking care of your karma. So that's the first stage of spiritual development, is how to take care of your body, speech, and mind to live a virtuous mind, virtuous life, a content life, so that, so that's the first stage, right? So a practitioner there, you see, what you develop is mindfulness, but not the mindfulness of your breath or the mindfulness of how you walk, but the mindfulness of whatever I do, is it virtuous or non-virtuous? So virtuous is what brings about happiness, And non-virtue is what has the consequence of bringing about suffering. So you become aware, if I drink things, is this virtuous or non-virtuous? How can I transform drinking into something virtuous? And how can I drink something and transform into something non-virtuous? If I go to bed, is it virtuous or non-virtuous? Will it bring happiness or suffering? If I go to the mall, is it virtuous or non-virtuous? Will it bring happiness or suffering? If I drive my car, is it virtuous or non-virtuous? Will it bring happiness or suffering? So everything you do, you start becoming mindful. You see, is that virtuous or non-virtuous? And gradually, so we all have our, how to say, I think, let's say 80% of our action are on automatic gear. We don't think, of what we do. We simply do it, Oh, I need to take a shower, I take a shower. I'm sick, I go to bed. I'm hungry, let's eat. We don't analyze whether it's virtuous or not. We simply do it. We have the impulse to do something, we simply do it, right? And then, if something happened, we get upset. If something happened, we become greedy. All these things happen on automatic gear due to habit, due to the power of conditioning. We are not at the level of the conscious level where we think about it. So it takes a lot of effort to develop that mindfulness. You see, it doesn't come, how to say, it's not one day you're completely unaware of it and the next day you become aware of it. No, it takes many years to go from that state of unawareness to the state where you are aware day and night of all your action, whether it's virtuous or not. So it's a profound work, but there's great satisfaction in doing that, When you become aware of all what you do is wholesome, all what you, and if you sleep, you straight, you purify, you clean it right there. You don't let it sit in your mind, you clean it. So that's the first stage. So that one calls that person a person of the initial spiritual development, a person that can take care of his mind, and that person knows when he dies he's going to go to a good place because he has taken care of his mind. So he doesn't have any fear or worry when he dies. He's okay, He has lived a good life. He doesn't. He knows, the mind is going to. He's happy. He's content with his mind, with her mind. He's at home. He's cozily at home with his mind. He has befriended himself or herself, right? Whereas many people, they constantly fight with themselves, between the little angel on one and the little devil on the other, right? Constantly, one side of the mind wants to do this, the other one wants to do that, and you have this inner conflict, right? So a person that at that level has resolved that problem, right? So it's always the good angel that wins, And if that one sometimes wins, well, that one, cleans it up, and like that. The next level is more difficult. So that's almost like for yogis and yoginis. So these are for people which are really sage, really smart. You see, so that person think, okay, I'm taking care of my mind, so next life gonna be okay. But what about the life after that? And the life after that? And the life in 1 million lives and in 1 billion life? How does that ever end? How does that function? So I'm born again and again and again. And each time I'm a baby, each time I have to be born in a mother's womb and I have to be constricted there and then being pushed out. And then I'm a small baby not knowing anything again, right? I'm hungry, I just can cry, you know. If something is scratching on my back, I can cry, and I hope my mom figure out that there's something itching me on the back, you know. So we're completely helpless. You know, let's say, you know, we're independent grown-up adult taking care of our own life, and then we end up that small baby completely dependent on other again, right? And then if our parents are nice parents together, we grow up most okay, you know. But if what's parents are a little bit screwed up, you know, or are alcoholic or this and that problem, you know, what kind of childhood do we have, right? And then depending, you know, some people get an education, some people don't get an education, some people are in a war zone, some people are in famine, you know. Again and again, I have to be born, you know, going through that, growing up, and then getting old, getting sick, dying again and again, right? So is that, you know, is that something to look forward, you know? So is there no end to that? You know, am I always pushed under the control of my thought, my emotion, my desire? You know, am I pushed eternally ahead, you know, from lifetime to lifetime? So some life are pleasant because we have good parents, we live in a beautiful country that are at peace, but at other time, we're born, you know, with awful parents, or, you know, our country is at war, or there's famine, or there's disaster. It's funny, I always like to study history. And it's amazing, you know, when you read history book, how many wars has been over the time. You know, is one war after the other. You know, in Europe, where I come from, you know, there's the 100-year war. You know, and there's the First World War, Second World War. You know, it's endless war. Each country is a story of wars. You know, Europe is crazy about that. But that means, you know, people were born there and experienced that, right? They were, yeah, you're born in a country and that country is at war and you kill each other, right? And then there's the big pests. I don't know, pest, plagues, big plagues, you know. So, you know, Spain, I think they lost 2/3 of their inhabitants, you know, in one great black plague, you know. Can you imagine half the population of your country dies, you know? And I think it happened, you know, when the Spanish conquistador came to South America, places, because they weren't immune to this disease. So, you know, complete countries disappeared because the people weren't able to deal with those bugs, right? So history, you know, it's not such a fun, you know, when you think about taking rebirth, well, I think we live in a very privileged country, in a privileged time, you know, we're not, at least till now, when we don't know in 10 years how it's gonna be like, you know? But I think our generation were quite fortunate, you know, where we lived. But you think ahead, you know, one life, two life, 100, a million, a billion life, endlessly under the control of karma delusion. So then you start thinking, wow, can one end that? Right? And there is a way to end it. Right? So one of the main drawing to push us ahead is our desire. Nobody forces us to take rebirth. We want. We are attached to a sense of self. We are attached to a sense of self, and we are attached to me and mine, you know. And but if one tries to inquire, where is this I? Where is this me? Is this me the body? Is this me a thought? Is this me an emotion? Where is this me? And the more you inquire, the less you find this me, this solid sense of me. So the me that gets upset, the me that wants something, where is this me? You know, is this me the body? Is this me the mind? Where is this me? And the more you inquire, instead of becoming clear, it becomes more confusing because you don't find this me that wants this and that. So if you have no me, there's no mine, you know? So let's say, you know, you go out and you park your car. It happened to me the other day, so I can use that example. You know? So you go out in a car and your friend's car has a big scratch, you know, but it's your friend's car. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. 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 If it's your enemies, oh, good. You know? If it's your friend, oh, yeah, yeah. But then it's your car. My car is a scratch. You know, me, mine. You know, ooh. You know, who did that? You know, and you know, you get much more. You know, so mine. You know, it brings up this sense of I. You know, so yeah. So, but if there's no I, you know, whether the scratch is on my car, my friend's car, then it's all the same. There's no me. The car is not mine. Yes, I use it, but it's not my car. It's just a car I use. So there's no emotional reaction, right? For example, there was a yogi living in a cave, and a burglar came in and took all his stuff, you know. So he came home, and his cave was empty, you know, for all his stuff. I said, oh, it's okay. You know, there's no, these things weren't mine, you know, they were just stuff, you know. So depending on how strong a sense of self, ego is, and how strong we are attached to things as mine, when these things get hurt or are taken away from us, we suffer. But if there's no sense of mine and there's no sense of I, you're not affected. You have that peace. And if you go from lifetime to lifetime, what is that thing, that glue that makes that the karma moves on? That karma is attached to the sense of I. So if there's no I, there's no karma. You see, the karma belongs to that individual, but if there's no individual, there's no karma, you're psychologically free. You're not pushed and pulled somewhere due to your karma. That's how you become free, right? So, and the interesting thing is that you don't get rid of a sense of self that has existed and that you have to give up something precious. That sense of self we have is a complete hallucination. When you actually realize it and become free of it, you become a new being. You have a new sense of self, you know, a completely liberated, spacious sense of self that is never hurt because there's no one to be hurt, right? There's no one to gain things, no? So it's a complete new sense of freedom. So not only are you free from karma, but that state of awakeness has clairvoyance, can see things far, you know, in time, in space. So the mind is just free, you know. Our mind is full of thought and emotion related to the sense of I. And everything gravitates around this sense of self. But when you don't have any more this sense of self, your awareness is completely open to a complete new dimension of existence. So at the second level of the path, one tries to see the drawback of this life that is always conditioned, that you have no freedom forever. So one tries to understand how that works and then try to become free of that conditioning, right? And how one does that is on the base of the ethic of the first level of the path. Then one develops calm abiding, a stable mind. And then within this stable mind, one inquires, well, if this sense of I have exists, where it is, one looks and one doesn't find. Where's this mine? These things that belong to me. Where is the me to whom these things belong? My cat, my dog, my partner, my children. Where is this me to whom all these things belong? And you don't find, right? And when you don't find, you experience a space, a new dimension of being, where all this clutter that we have on our mind disappears. And you discover what's called liberation, nirvana. So that's the second stage of the path. One tries to develop this aspiration towards liberation by realizing the drawback of being always conditioned from lifetime to lifetime with no choice. Right? So one gets to this aspiration to that freedom, and then one tries to walk on that path towards that freedom. Right? So that's the second level of the spiritual path, right? Then you have the third level. So beings on the third level, they realize that, but they have something more. You see, the second level of person is mostly concerned about himself. I want to become free. It's a mess. Let's become free. But what about my dear child, my dear parents, my dear friends, my cat, my dog, my donkey, what about them? Can I just become free and forget about that? They have been my dear parents, my lover. Over lifetimes, they have been my parents, my lover, my partner, my children. Can I just go into liberation, into nirvana and forget about them? Right? So there comes this aspiration. No, I cannot do that. I have to free each and every one. Right? How can I be free and let the other continue in their suffering? No. So there, what one tries to give birth to is this altruistic aspiration. I take the vow, I will never give up. I will always come back until each and every living beings are freed. So I take upon myself to free each and every one. Right? So that's the bodhisattva aspiration, Yes, so I will become free, but only in order to have the skill and the method to help others. So one still works on that path to freedom, but with love and compassion and with the wish to come back to help others once one has achieved that freedom. And then these beings, they have the choice whether to be reborn or not. They are not pushed by their desire. They're not pushed by their grasping, their hang-ups, Let's say you're addicted to coffee. Every morning you have your coffee. First thing you wake up in the morning, let's have a nice cup of coffee. Okay, so you have that imprint for 20, 30 years of having your coffee every morning. You wake up, took coffee, Okay, so you die. You don't have a body anymore. But that imprint of coffee is there, right? So in the bardo, in the meditation, oh, coffee, but I don't have a body. I cannot drink coffee. So you're going to take rebirth to have a cup of coffee, because of your attachment. You come back because of your attachment. There's no coffee in the bardo, but I want my coffee. So you come back. You need a physical body to enable to enjoy coffee, right? You're addicted to people. You're attached to your friends. But in order to enjoy your friends, you need a body, you need to be around them, right? So you want to come back. Right? So it's nobody pushing us back. We want to come back. We don't like to be a disembodied body. We don't like to be, because of our attachments. That's the reality we know. That's the known. We cannot conceive another reality. So you see, now there's another training. So from being a self-centered individual, let's say, we as individual, we learn to grow up. I think in our Western culture, even more than in Asia. For example, in Asia, people don't think themselves as an individual very much. They think they're part of the village, so they identify with the village, with the monastery, with the with their tribe or with their clan. They identify themselves with something bigger, right? And their life is devoted to that bigger thing. It's not devoted for them individual, guys. Where us Westerner, well, in the Western world, it's me, me, my life. And then, yes, maybe my partner, my children, my friends, my business, you know, and then something more abstract, my town, my country, you know. And then now with global warming, we have to stretch even more all humanity, you know. But naturally, we come back to me. I'm the center of my universe, and I'm caring mostly about me. 90% of my thought, of my speech, of who I care is about me. Right? So to go from that to all the time think of all living being is a huge work. You don't go from thinking about me most of the time to thinking of all living beings all the time. A bodhisattva never thinks about him. Everything he does is for all living beings. And not only all humans, but all the animals, all the birds, all the insects, and then all the spirits, all the devas, all the beings in the hell, in the preteriums, all these different dimensions that we cannot see. So a bodhisattva, whoever has mind, whoever has a sense of wanting to be happy and not wanting to suffer, that bodhisattva wishes to help and bring all these beings to enlightenment, right? So it's a training where gradually you go from this self-centered attitude to this way of being where you care for all living beings all the time. I'm drinking this tea for all living beings. I'm going to bed for all living beings. I'm going to the supermarket for all living beings. So you live for all living beings instead of living for you. So it's a huge, but if one can induce that, it's so much joy. It's a sense of being that is completely, I don't know. What can be a greater purpose in life than wanting to bring all living beings to enlightenment, to the highest level of happiness forever? What do I live for? What do I live for? To take care of my garden, to, you know, to visit my friends, to go on holiday there. What's the purpose of my life? Compare that to this attitude. I want to bring all living beings to enlightenment. No matter how many millions of life it's going to take, I will always come back to help others until all living beings have reached enlightenment. So it's a completely far out, outrageous state of mind. You know, it's completely, how can even an individual think something like that, right? So these beings that induce that state of mind, they are called bodhisattva, or mind of, and they have generated the mind of enlightenment. And those beings that have that mind that is vast, that encompass all living beings, these are the beings that will reach Buddhahood, enlightenment, because it's that mind that cares for all living beings. You see, the arhat, the one that reaches liberation, he reaches a narrow liberation, right? So yes, he's free forever, but he doesn't have this omniscient mind. The omniscient mind comes about from that attitude that cares for all living beings, you know? And actually, you see, a bodhisattva on the first bhumi, he can have 100 bodies at the same time to help in different dimensions, 100 people. When he reaches the second bhumi, he can have 10,000 bodies at the same time. When he reaches the third level, he has 1,000,000 bodies at the same time. When he reached the fourth, he has million, yes, 100 million. And each time it multiplies by 100. Right? So the higher you go, the more the capacity of your being, you know. So you can see millions of past life, millions of future life. You can read the mind of millions of living beings and help each one according to their need, you know, what they need, you know. So what enlightenment is, you know, we don't really, if you don't study it a bit deep, you don't know actually what enlightenment is. You know, enlightenment, we think, oh, an enlightenment is somebody that has a good heart, you know, he looks happy, you know. We don't understand what scope of what that mind is, you know, what being omniscient means. So an omniscient being see the mind of all living beings simultaneously. You see all their past, present, and future simultaneously. Can you imagine having a mind like that? It's completely, you know, for us, not even science fiction author speak about something like that. Yeah, the Buddhists, you know, express that, and there's a path to lead that, and there are beings in each generation that lead that experience. And each one of us, we can follow that path and lead to that state, you know. So it's amazing, you know. So it's so wonderful to meet such a tradition and try to tread on that path, you know. So tomorrow we're going to, tomorrow and after tomorrow, we're going to explore that, you know, go inside and try to see how, you know, experientially, how we can discover ourselves, you know, our hangs-ups, our limitation, and then how to break free of them gradually. You know, it's not like making instant coffee. Sadly, it doesn't work like that. You know, we are in this mess since beginningless time. So it's not, you know, a weekend or even a lifetime that's gonna fix it. It's something, you know, it's so beautiful. But the thing is, whatever work you do in this life is not lost. You see, it continues from lifetime to lifetime. Right? So it says the bodhisattva on the sutra path, it takes 3 eons, you know, 3 cosmic periods for him to reach enlightenment. But there's a shortcut path, which is called the Tantra path, where you can, you know, within a few lifetimes, you can reach enlightenment. And some yogi can even do it within 1 lifetime because they're so smart and so determined and maybe have some good imprints from past life. So in this life, they can make it. You know? But when you see the potential we have, you know, to become omniscient and to help all living beings. What? And then you compare that to your life. What do I live for? You know, it's so poor, it's so limited. You know, So it's so wonderful to be able to expand one's heart, to care for all living beings, to control your mind. You see, also there's a level where we see everything as solid. But even through science, we know that things are not solid as they appear, right? So the more you understand emptiness, you understand selflessness, things become uh, they become less tangible, more transparent. You see through things. You know, things are not as solid. Everything has a rainbow-like nature, right? It's there, but at the same time, it's not really solidly there. Right? So these insights come to you gradually. You know, the more mind becomes freer, the more you sense awaken to another dimension, you know, that was always there, but it was blocked because we live in this concrete solid world, and we stopped our mind, our awareness is stopped at this gross physical object. So we don't see what's behind, you know, we stuck. All right, I think that's all for tonight. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to try to answer.
I guess I'm the MC. Okay. Any questions online or here? I'm going second. No? Everybody got it?
I have a question when you were talking about virtue and non-virtue. For thousands and thousands of years, you were talking about wars and things, and it seems conflict seems inherent in the nature of humanity. So would you define, depending on the nature of the conflict, it being virtuous or non-virtuous, or is conflict by its essence what?
I think there is, so for example, certain bodhisattva, the stories of bodhisattva killing someone. So, for example, if someone had killed Hitler, it might have been a great service, you know, if it had killed him while he was young or while he was in his training period, right? So in certain case, it's actually virtuous to kill someone.
Just context.
It depends the context and the motivation. So the person that would kill Hitler wouldn't do it out of anger or hatred. He would do it in order to save the life of so many people, right? So in Buddhist, the action, whether something is virtuous or not, depends very much on one's motivation. Right? So you can be very generous, but you do it out of pride, out of, you know, and like, so it depends. I think even in the Western court system, right? If somebody kills somebody, how heavy it is, depended on the motivation, right? So you drive on a road and somebody jumps in front of your car, you kill that person, but it's not real killing, but you didn't have the intention. Yes, the person died, but you didn't have the intention to kill. So you see, when you study karma, you have all these aspects, right? So the motivation is very important, then the action, and then at the end, even if you have done it, whether you regret it or whether you're happy about having done it, right? So yes, so it has all these different aspects, right? So the more you know those, the more you know, you can navigate and control.
So in the Heart Sutra, you know, there's the no form, et cetera, et cetera. So how would you look at the nature of the universe? Is it an essential manifestation of mind, or what exactly?
So what the Buddha said, the universe is a collective creation of the mind of people which are going to be reborn in that universe. So while the universe wasn't created, the beings, all the billions of people that have the karma, they create that world and then they inhabited it. Right? But the world is impermanent, right? When the cause and condition finish, that world disappear, and then, another world come into being. And probably there are multi-universes simultaneously, multi-dimension things happening. So we just know this dimension. And now with scientific instrument, we can see further, further, further. We don't know how big the universe actually is. Right? But I think the spiritual path is very much, from my perspective, an expansion of consciousness. You see, you expand your concept of time, past, future, and you concept and you broadness, concern about me to concern of all living beings. And then in terms of deafness, what are things in reality? Where is the me? Where is the body? How are things? And there you enter a little bit like similar to quantum physics. Things are solid, they appear to our eye consciousness are solid, but when you start inquiring things, even with your mind, what scientists can do with their instrument, you as an individual with your mind, you can do the same. You can inquire and you don't find, that solid things that you thought was there. Yeah. So for me, from a Western point of view, when I think about what effect the spiritual path has had on my mind the last 40 years, is this expansion of consciousness in time, in space, and in depth, right? So to put it in Western perspective. So it's, from being a limited human being, you become a bigger, vaster human being, So it's a beautiful journey to be on, Yes. Yeah.
I'm not sure if I'll be able to articulate what I'm trying to ask, but I'll start with the example you gave of you're driving your car and through no fault of your own, somebody gets killed. Well, your karma brought you to that place. But if you say you did not have the intention to kill the person, then isn't that splitting a hair to say that it's a way of escaping the responsibility for what you did?
Well, I would say there's some limited karma there, right? Because you kill, you were the instrument to that person to die, but you didn't have the intention to kill. It's very different than you go there and you look for someone and you run, it's different. And then there's another effect, when that person dies, even you killed it, but then you have profound regret. You feel so bad that you killed that person. Oh, I shouldn't have done it, It's very different than you kill that person. Oh, yes, great, I got it, It's very, and then depends on how much suffering that person experienced. You see, if that person is killed up and didn't suffer much, is one thing. But if that person you really torture it very slowly, that person dies slowly, experience a lot of suffering, again, the karma is very different.
But in that last case, you have given that person the opportunity through the suffering that they experienced by your to wipe out some of their karma. Wipe out some of their karma.
You were doing him a service, right?
Well, you could be, I mean, if that's how it works,
Yes,
you
yes.
could be doing that.
Yeah.
But the other point that I had, which came up earlier in there, was you really can't affect somebody else's karma.
No, you cannot.
That's almost a given.
Yes.
So then what is the point of a bodhisattva's omniscience? Because even a Buddha cannot change somebody else's karma.
That's
so
true.
that, I guess, is my root question.
Yes, yes.
What is the point of omniscience since you
Yes.
can't change somebody else's karma?
You cannot change karma, but you can convince him or her to change his or her behavior. You know, you see, look, let's say I'm a Buddha, you know, and you're a handsome gentleman, you know. So I manifest as a beautiful woman, you know, and I fall in love with you and I convince you to become a better human being, you know. So you make a certain step in that life, and then next life you have a little better condition, and again I manifest you as your dog, and I knew, and then you generate love and compassion towards me, you know, this poor dog, and again your mind becomes a little bit better, you know. So gradually I can help you from life to life because I know your mind, I know what will trigger your good qualities.
But the same thing could apply to me for killing the person with the car.
Huh?
The same thing could apply to me for killing.
Yes, perhaps.
Could have done it, yeah.
Yes, perhaps.
So it's
yes, definitely.
I guess you can only understand it through experiencing it, not through an intellectual process.
Yes, finally, yes. But at our level of evolution, the only thing we have is our reasonings, right? You know, yeah. We have to use the tools we have now. Then later on, when we have more advanced tool, you know, we can maybe let go of those we
Ones
use
we don't
now.
need.
Thank you. You're welcome.
We hear a lot about motivation and how important it is in our spiritual practice. And you were just speaking about motivation a little while ago. I'm curious if you could speak a little bit more about something that could be perceived as a selfish activity, like going for a hike or playing guitar or having, you know, ice cream or whatever it might be. And, you know, sometimes I motivate to, you know, may I do this to relax on the path and be able to benefit because I'm more relaxed, or something along those lines, where it's a benefit to my mind in a calming way, and therefore I can have maybe a positive influence on somebody. But is there something else that you can add to that, or some other motivational tactic that might make it more comprehensive or more beneficial?
Well, there's a bodhisattva practice that's called to rest. You know, so when you're tired, you know, when you have served other and you have worked for other and you depleted of energy, so there's a practice where you rest, you know, to gather your strength again, to be able to help more. So that rest can be on your sofa, but can also go on a walk or go on a holiday. You know, it's something that refreshes your mind. You know, that's okay. So it depends the motivation, whether you do it for yourself or whether you do it to gather your energy back in order to, you know, being again helpful.
Thank you.
Let me ask. Anybody online have a question? Okay, if not,
Venerable Rene, I wanted to thank you for inspiring us to get on that amazing adventure, which is developing our mind. I know from my own experience that it can be, although very inspiring, also kind of difficult to imagine ourselves on this path. So I wanted to change gears a little bit and ask you a personal question. If you could tell us the story, how that all began for you, how you sat for the first time on the cushion, and how you managed to stay on it for, 40 something, or has it been, or 30 something years in retreat. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience so we can learn from a fellow Westerner, please?
I don't know. I mean, I think we all go through that. You know, you're a kid, you grow up, and then, you know, you depend on your parents, and then you have to become gradually, you know, what kind of job you're going to do, what you're going to do with your life. So you have to figure out something to do with your life, you know. So depending on the place where you grow up, you know, your environment, you go into this and that direction, basically. And I was brought up as a Catholic, you know, and yeah, well, my parents were Catholic. We went to church, you know, and things like that. So went to Sunday school and things like that. And then you start asking questions, well, if there's God, so the God created everything, and God is good. So how come that the whole world is not good? Where does the bad come from? Oh, there's the devil. Oh, where did this one come from? Oh, but the God created him too, because it was only God at the beginning. Oh, well, but then he creates, okay, so and then you have to have faith, yeah, but faith not based on any logic, So, yeah, so you're exposed to other tradition and then you look further. So I was exposed as a young adult to a lot of some Western thinker, but mostly Indian master, Krishnamurti was an interesting character, and then Aurobindo, Ramdas, Vivekananda, so Indian yogis, and a little bit Taoism and East Asia. So kind of interesting thought, and a little bit Carlos Castaneda, and this American Indian, tradition. There was one lady called Lynn Andrew, or there's some women shaman from Canada. So she could transport herself to South America simply with her thought. So there was kind of interesting inquiry, people which have discovered another dimension of their mind, of their reality. So that to my inquiry. That's how I end up in 1979 in Kopan Monastery in Nepal. And Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche called the November course. And then after that, so it's interesting, but let's look further. What other traditions are out there? So for another year, I went around, looked more. And then I found that the only tradition that I encountered that had this bodhisattva idea, that you can take the responsibility to free all living beings. Many other traditions and great spiritual paths to self-liberation, but none have had this bodhisattva ideal. I'm responsible to lead all living beings to enlightenment. It's my responsibility. It's not God's responsibility or some other yogi's responsibility. It's my job. I have to take that on me. So that was, I only found that in Buddhism, that bodhisattva ideal. And that's what made me then enter that path. But I was a very screwed up individual, I mean, really, as a young adult, I was in the hippie period, so I liked smoking, I like LSD, I like getting high, and I was a florist. I had a flower shop in Geneva. My parents had a flower shop, so it was convenient. I could go 6 months travel. I could always come home and have a job. My parents had the business, so and like that. So I would, for 6 months, I would travel, and 6 months I would work, in a family flower shop. And then, of course, life events. I had a motorbike accident, and things say, oh, I could have died. I said, oh, suddenly what you hear theoretically, you face, oh, it's not a joke. I'm gonna die, and I could have died here, because that usually on my motorbike I would never wear the helmet. And that morning I had brought my girlfriend to the railway station, so I gave the helmet to her. So going home from the railway station, I put I had nowhere to put it, so I put it on my head. And when that person hit me, because that lady didn't see me, she was at the stop and I was on the main road, and she came out and she hit me, right? So I jumped and I fell on my head. And gladly I had the helmet on that day, right? So I didn't, I had some, broken bones here and there, but my head was okay. But then I was laying in the hospital bed, and I was for 3 days I didn't sleep. So, I think people don't realize when you have certain accident, you're in a state of shock. So actually your mind becomes different. You don't sleep. Actually, you don't have pain. I think the adrenaline in your body makes you immune to pain. So you're there in a kind of strange space. And I had this mantra in my head: I could have died. Could have died. And it really synced very deeply in my mind. I could have died. And then I became more serious on the spiritual path because, I could have died, So what was, before that, I like the spiritual path, but I like my girlfriend, I like my little LSD, I like going to the beach, was having the spiritual path, but with a lot of compromise. But then when you say, "Oh, I could have died," then suddenly it sinks to a completely different level. So then I gave up all that thing, I gave up my girlfriend, she wasn't interested in spiritual, gave up everything, and I went to Kopan again and practice. I had broken my hip, so I had to sit on a chair, with the legs down. So for many years I couldn't sit cross-legged. And then basically, as an individual, I was, I don't know, depressed was the right word, but melancholic. We had a difficult childhood. My father was a little bit alcoholic and he had girlfriends and, so at home was always fighting. So you brought up, in a fighting environment. It's not fun, so. And I was maybe a little bit introverted to protect myself from getting involved too much, So that's how I became a young adult, a little bit depressed, a little bit melancholic, and trying to figure out what I'm going to do with my life. Nothing, nothing was very much fun, So I tried to find fun here and there. So the first years the spirit was, it's difficult, to realize how screw up you are. At the beginning, I'm quite okay, I manage financially. I find my ways to get my satisfaction, my happiness here and there. So you don't realize actually how berserk you are because you think you're quite okay. But at Kopan, the first job, the morning meditation was 7 to 8 to sit 1 hour silently in the Gompa. So so you have 200 people sitting together. From outside, they look all okay, quiet. But the mind inside, we're supposed to watch the breath. I couldn't stay on 2 breaths in a row. My mind would jump all over the place, and the body was restless, I couldn't sit still, And you watch your mind being like a monkey, how can I ever be happy with a mind like that? That was my first realization, How can I be happy with a mind? Either you fall asleep, you think about all these other things. You cannot stay still. No control over your mind at all. And that's a big lesson, Wow, no matter where I am, no matter with whom I am, if I have a mind crazy like that, how can I be happy? Not only won't be happy myself, but I will make people berserk around me as well, So I think 1 month, every morning, we sat for 1 hour watching your crazy mind. It really has a big impact on you, All the image you had about yourself being smart, being good, doing what, look at your mind. It's a big lesson, a big lesson. Because whenever we want something, we want to move. I think the image of being in jail is very powerful. I was actually in jail once for 3 days. In my teenage days, one night, while we were LSD on a fire outside, one had the smart idea to go to paint the wall of the university, to make, because the wall of the university was how to say, boringly gray, concrete. So let's make, a beautiful underwater painting, mural. So here we went, with our paint and things like, and of course the cops came too. So we ended up in jail, so really. But being in jail, suddenly all what you have the freedom to do, you cannot. You really, to get food, you depend on whether a person gives you food or not, Whereas your whole life you could go to the fridge or to the shop to get something. There, no, nothing, no contact with the outside world, no, you don't know what whether people know you're in or not, It's a very strange experience, this sense deprivation that you have when you're in jail. It's a very interesting experience. So being meditating, having your mind is exactly the same thing. But instead of being forced on you by outside, you put yourself in that situation where you deal with your thought, your emotion, and you sense deprivation that you impose on yourself. And you have just to deal with your crazy mind, and you allow yourself not to escape, You're not escaping to the fridge to find if there's something interesting in there, You're not turning on the TV to get distracted. You don't going for a walk. No, you sit with your berserk mind. It's not easy, It's kind of, yeah. But gradually, it clears itself. So this powerful practice to clean the mind, spiritual practice where you clean that dirt, that murkiness from your mind. So one profound experience I had, I was maybe 25, something like that. So wherever I went around the world, I was there with my gray, dull, bored, half depressed mind, even though I traveled, India, Nepal, and I went overland, Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, but wherever I was, I was just, oh, not another temple, not another museum, not another thing. Wow. The whole life looked in gray, no, nothing exciting, I saw exciting people, but it didn't excite me at all. So then I did a Vajrasattva retreat. So you recite 100,000 mantra Vajrasattva, and it takes about 3 months. So you imagine, a Buddha figure on top of you, and for 3 months you take a shower of light while you recite the mantra. And after 3 months, my gloominess, my depression, my grayness went, never came back. It's interesting, Then suddenly I was again excited and looking at flowers and people, everything was again interesting, Before I was just bored. So there I saw the benefit of spiritual practice, that actually it works. If you apply yourself to spiritual practice, it has an effect on the mind. Yeah. And then when I was 27, so I would still go back and forth between Switzerland and India. And then I don't know how it happened. I think a friend of mine saw Lama Zopa Rinpoche and asked whether it was good for him to become monk. So I said, well, I can ask whether I have the karma sometimes in this life when I'm old, when I have lived all my crazy, interesting things, I had my partners and, my exciting life, whether at the end of my life I have the karma to become monk. I said, okay, it's not much big risk to ask him that, because it's very far in the future, So I went to Rinpoche. I said, Rinpoche, do you have the karma sometimes later in life to become monk? So Rinpoche used to make divination with dice. Yes, you have the karma to become monk. No. But right now, and his comment was, later on you might be involved with some women. I was, so then I thought, okay, okay, I'm gonna try it because in Buddhism you can give back your vows, right? So I thought, look, I'm gonna try, So I tiptoes my foot in it, and if it doesn't suit me, I run off, I can still do my other thing. So I'm Gemini, Gemini don't like to be put in boxes, There is an air sign, they need a lot of space, right? So well, His Holiness Dalai Lama ordained me as Gelong. So there were, it's not only His Holiness and me, there were 200 people taking ordination at the same time from His Holiness. And out of the 200 people, there were 12 Westerner, and all the rest were Tibetan or Sherpa, things like that. So we had a translation for us. So when we came out of the ordination, we went to have a coffee or a tea in a chai shop. And so we were 12 people. And so each one, said, oh, I want to do this with my life as a monk and things like that. And I said, I don't know how long I'm going to be monk. I try, and maybe after a few months I give up, And the other looked at me outraged. Wow, how can you think like that? If you think like that, you're definitely not going to last long, things like that. And now maybe 38 years, I'm still there, And amongst the 12, and only 3 left. Yeah. So I think psychology, we're all different, made up, so we have to know, but it's not like, I was born as a highly realized being and my path was very easy, I had my struggle and I still have my struggle, it's just the path, the journey is like that. It's like, how they say, in Christianity, they say, passing the dark, how do you say? Huh? Yes, that's it. The dark night of the soul. So really to go to the light, you have to cross the dark night of the soul. And each one has to go through that, So it's not like it goes from light to light. No, you really have to deal with your inner demons, your inner darkness. It's, Aurobindo used to say, the higher you go, the lower you have to bring the light. And it's really like that. It's not like your mind goes gradually a highway to heaven, No, it goes to both direction, all the time. So it's an amazing journey, but it's not an easy journey, Each one, you really have another Lama Yeshe used to take. You have to become your own psychotherapist. From a modern perspective, that's really that. You have to. Nobody can do it for you. You can do it only you. Yeah. So I'm still on that journey. I still try, I think the ideal of the bodhisattva is such a far out, beautiful image, And with the years, I befriend myself, I'm kind of happy with myself. And so, I keep on going. What better to do, than to become a better human beings, and yeah. So I think it's a wonderful journey. So I hope you all, are on this wonderful journey yourself, at your own pace. We're all trying to become a decent human being with a big H. Yeah. Yeah.
Would you give me and whoever else wants to practice some homework for tonight until we meet again in the morning, please?
You mean you promise you're not going to home and go to bed straight and forget about it?
Can we go dancing?
Yes. I mean, I think one interesting thing is you go to bed and you make a prayer. May I be conscious of my dream. May I remember my dream. And that your dream, that you get some from your mind, you get some insight about yourself in your dream. So sleep can be very virtuous, can be very interesting. One has to learn how to sleep well. So usually one tries to sleep like the Buddha passed away, on the right hand. So because on the subtle body, so you block the channel where the desire and attachment are in. So your mind follow less attachment in your dream state. I think the most where the training starts is the morning when one wakes up. So usually, the gradual path to enlightenment, basically you live within the state of consciousness of the Lamrim. So the two main practice is emptiness, and the other one is bodhicitta, compassion. So you wake up in the morning. The purpose of my life, I live for others. No, the purpose of my life is to generate love, compassion, patience, and to help all living beings, and for their sake to reach enlightenment. It's like His Holiness, when he wakes up in the morning, the Dalai Lama, that's what he does, right? And then whatever you see, everything is a senseless. There's no I, there's no body, there's no mind, there's no room, there's no breakfast, there's no coffee, there's no bathroom, there's no toothbrush. Everything is a senseless. So there's nothing to hold on to. Your mind remains free. So the two main practice is realize the essencelessness of everything throughout your day and to expand your heart of loving kindness for all living beings and aspire to reach enlightenment for everyone. So the practice is really to remain in those states of mind as much as possible, starting from the moment we wake up, And then throughout the day when we lose it, we bring it back, constantly bring it back. So one develops that mindfulness of always being in that state. And then when one adds tantra to that image, so then we try to visualize ourselves as a pure energy, light energy body, And then within this body, there's a subtle body, and within that body, there's a more subtle body. Right? So one tries to awaken, to become conscious of this more subtle light energy body. Right? So in Tantra, there's that added dimension. On top of the previous dimension that one has developed, there's another dimension that one tries to practice.
I think, oh, sorry.
No.
I think there might have been questions online. Are there any questions online? Oh, well. I can't read the chat, so. Is there a chat? Oh, okay. Oh.
Okay, first question, where along the path to enlightenment does the mind become omniscient?
At the end.
The last question is, what meditation do you recommend for busy people? And can you lead us on a short meditation?
I don't think there's one meditation that would work for everyone. It depends the cyclic of the person, right? So each one we are a little bit different. So certain people like a mental image, some people like the breath, some people, yeah, I think it's different to everyone. But I will lead one that I found beneficial, for 5 minutes, okay? So usually at the beginning, one doesn't do anything. One just brings the mind home, from being involved in the sense of seeing, hearing, and things like that. One try gently bring the mind to look inside. And also there can be, you see, even though one brings the mind inside, in French we have a word that means se recueillir, and I haven't found an English word that you see, you bring the mind, you look inside, but with admiration, with appreciation to the mere fact of being alive, to exist. How beautiful it is just to exist, to be conscious, to be aware. So to have this sense of awe and appreciation to the beauty of being alive. Now some people, because they have some kind of pure mind due to their work in previous life, they can look into their heart and their heart is like a lake of light, a lake of love. And the heart is very soft, very gentle. And it feels like it's like returning home. So in our heart, there's a clear light. Where all your goodness, all your aspiration of being a decent human being, all your aspiration for goodness in the world is there. So for most of us, we don't have access to that. Even though it's there, it's veiled. So we project that outside because we cannot touch it in ourselves yet. So we project it in front of us. And we imagine a beautiful being of light, whether Buddha, whether Chenrezig, any being that for you embody this perfection that you aspire to. So any beings of light that in your tradition or in your culture, for you represents enlightenment. Can be Jesus or anyone for you that incarnates this ultimate goodness. And then you imagine that he or her pours loving light towards you, that he or she really loves you, really cares for you. And beams of light radiate from him or her into you. So with each inhalation, you inhale that light that comes from him or her. So from every pore of his or her body, light of love and compassion pours into you. So with each inhalation, you inhale that light. And you imagine that each cell of your body gets rejuvenated, and each cell of your body turns into a cell of light. So the more you inhale light, the more your own body turns into light. And then you imagine that gradually that light comes from that being, especially from his or her heart. You inhale that light, and that light opens your own heart, makes your own heart soft and gentle and loving. So your heart becomes warm, soft, gentle, loving. So you keep on inhaling that light, and when you exhale, you imagine radiating that love, that gentleness from your heart around you. So gradually you become love, you become compassion. Each cell of your body is love. Each cell of your body is compassion. And then from your heart, you imagine touching the beautiful heart of the people around you. So as you have a heart of love, all other beings also have this pure heart of love within them. So imagine from your heart, from your light, you're able to touch the heart of other beings and awaken their love, their light. All right. Thank you very much. It was lovely to meet you.
Well, Venerable,
Good night.
you dove right in. We wanted to make a mandala offering, so we didn't get a chance. Can we do it tonight or?
Maybe tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
It was lovely to meet you all. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Venerable.